afraid of something. To you, this might be spiders. The thought of a weird, eight-legged creature crawling around might absolutely horrify you. On the other hand, it might be something as mundane as dolls or puppies. What I'm afraid of, though, is something a little more vague than that. And it's something that I'd like to bargain likely affects you too. The fear of imperfection, more sparingly referred to as a telephobia, is a fear that has impacted me deeply for most of my life, turning me into what psychologists have called a neurotic perfectionist. Someone who obsesses over the imperfections in their life, as little or as large as they may be. To better illustrate my point, let me take you back to the first time where I truly felt that I had failed at something. In the 4th grade, when I got a D+ on a math quiz. It felt like my world had completely shattered, like I was useless. So I stuffed the paper in my bag and refused to tell anyone else what I had gotten, concealing this crushing failure from everyone around me. To a 9-year-old me, it was more than just a quiz. It felt like a verdict on my worth. It was more than just a bad grade. It was about feeling completely and utterly inadequate. Once I got to high school, though, things just got harder. My own imperfections becoming more and more prevalent. And by the time I was in grade 10, I was jumping ahead courses because I felt that I had to get ahead in order to lower my chances of failure. University applications, which once seemed so far away, were approaching at what seemed like the speed of light. And it was honestly scary, leaving me and many of my peers feeling as though if we didn't do well in our high school years, our lives would be doomed. We've all heard it, the stories of top achieving students, internationally recognized in their fields, definitely qualified enough to skip any form of higher education and move straight on into their careers, getting accepted into maybe 1 or 2 programs, prestigious or not. And it left me, and probably many of you, thinking that if they couldn't get in, then how can I? It was horrifying enough that the rising grades of graduate classes made finding a post-secondary opportunity even harder by the year, with the University of Toronto reporting that 52.4% of students that were enrolled in the first-year engineering program in 2017 had a grade 12 average of 95% or higher, and that by 2020, that number had risen to 68.4%. This meant that for students, keeping a high average wasn't enough to get us into the programs we wanted anymore, pushing us even further towards a culture where students work themselves to the bone just because they felt the need they had to keep up with the monstrous work ethic to vie with the rising trend of downright overqualified graduates. On social media and all around me, I heard my peers talking about every next extracurricular they were applying to. Every SAT retake, aptitude test, AP exam, and extra class they were taking, just so they could vie with these graduates. I saw my friends pushing themselves away from the things they wanted to do, just because they had needed more time to study, just so they could become a perfect student. A strange term if we think about it, because how could someone become perfect? What constitutes perfection at a time in our lives when we are constantly learning new things? Is it someone who always gets good grades? Someone with a stellar list of extracurricular awards and achievements? Is it someone who has both? And why did this cause students to feel the need to push themselves away from their hobbies and interests? Because I know I can't count the number of times I've wanted to try something new, but felt as if I started now, it would be worthless or a waste of time. Times where I skipped out on a morning swim practice because I had stayed up too late the night beforehand studying. Weeks where I neglected practicing guitar, much to the dismay of my teacher, because I spent time catching up on homework assignments or getting ahead. Why did me and many of my friends feel the need to fit ourselves into a lifestyle that we didn't particularly enjoy, just so we could get and become better students. Because on the contrary, there are many sources on the internet, including a study done by Harvard Health, that consolidate the fact that participating in enjoyable extracurricular activities is not only beneficial to our overall physical and mental health, but also our academic performance. So why did we, and many others, feel the need to push ourselves into a dull box, which truthfully wasn't benefiting us at all whatsoever? Why did we and so many others feel the need to strip ourselves of our individuality just to fit a societal norm? Well, this might be attributed to the fact that once we step outside of this box, we don't fit what we deem as perfect anymore, which often becomes hard to accept. This phenomena is the reason why many students feel the need to keep up with this lifestyle and push themselves away from the things they want to do. And while all these things seem extremely obvious in our personal lives, what may be less obvious is that this innate tendency that we have to distance ourselves from imperfection roots fundamental flaws in our society. The nirvana fallacy, a term initially coined by economist Harold Debsett in 1969, describes a view on life that implicitly presents the relevant choice as between an existing institutional arrangement and an idealistic norm. Well, what does this mean? This means that rather than finding a solution that aims to reduce a problem, society would rather go in circles searching for their own perfect solution. Think of it this way. In an ideal world, we could create a medication that's able to cure any ailment. But the fundamental reality of it is that we can't. Frankly, there is no one-size-fits-all solution to everything. Complex problems require complex and multifaceted solutions, forcing us to find more complex and multiple error-prone cures, which truthfully aren't always going to be the most effective. And while we may understand this as a truth, it often becomes hard to accept that in an ideal world, all of this complexity would be simply unnecessary. So rather than searching for this realistic possibility, we would rather go in circles trying to find this ideal norm. Well, this idea provides a greater understanding of why students work themselves to the bone, trying to achieve perfection. To them, their perfect solution might seem like being an ideal student in a certain field, which is why students feel the need to hold themselves to unrealistically high standards, just so they can fit into this idea. Students feel the need to fit into this idea just to be considered by themselves a person with worth. But now, how might we fight this idea? How do we stop the self-doubt and negativity that comes with making a mistake, with being imperfect? Well, it might seem like an odd idea at first, but I promise sticking with it can yield some positive results. The answer? Fight perfectionism with perfectionism itself. Flip your stance on your own imperfections. Know that it isn't a bad thing that you aren't perfect, rather that it shows where you have room for improvement. Completely detach your perceived notions of uselessness and worthlessness from your idea of perfection, and turn yourself into what the National Institute of Health calls a normal perfectionist. They claim that while it is usually emphasized that perfectionism comes with underlying feelings of doubt, shame, failure, or procrastination, perfectionism has some adaptive or healthy aspects, as it promotes striving for growth. Weird, right? How could something that has become the #1 stressor for students, and something that roots fundamental flaws in our society, become beneficial to us with just a change in our perspective? And while it may seem contradictory to everything else that I've said, I'd like to disagree. The problem was never with our fight for excellence. It was about the negative, inflated expectations of ourselves that came with being unable to fulfill these expectations. And while it might seem quite daunting to change this view, I can assure you that becoming more resilient can start with something as simple as setting more realistic short-term goals, reflecting on your room to grow and improve. As societal norms and our lives grow and evolve, we find ourselves at a point where acknowledging our negatively perfectionist standards becomes crucial in navigating our vastly diverse situations. So I implore you to become a normal perfectionist. Use the mistakes you've made as guidance for the next try, rather than wallowing in self-pity and doubt at the first mention of failure and giving up. And while it may seem quite daunting to change these ideologies that you've held on for years, I can assure you that just a simple change or even acknowledgement in your current perspective is sometimes all you need to get the ball rolling. In our personal lives, this change can make us both happier and healthier, while at a larger scale, also being able to make institutional change. It's a well-known fact that no matter how we try to look for it, how far and wide we search, true perfection doesn't exist. So rather than wallowing in self-doubt because of one bad game, one bad race, a bad percent lost on a quiz, use what you've done as a guidance for the next try. Know that one bad game or race or test doesn't make everything you've done in the past and everything that you're able to do in the future worthless. You might never be perfect, but that doesn't mean that you can never improve. Thank you.